Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Stacia and I'm just a girl on the internet that likes movies and I like talking about them, sharing my thoughts on particular films. This week's film in honor of David Lynch and his passing is going to be the 1980 film The Elephant Man. This movie is indeed directed by David Lynch. It was his second feature-length film after Eraserhead. And this movie is secretly produced by Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks actually produces a lot of movies that aren't his normal comedy movies. He also produced The Fly, the David Cronenberg film from the 80s. But he leaves his name off of those movies because he thinks if people see that it's a Mel Brooks production, that leads people to believe it's going to be another type of film, and he doesn't want people going in and having those preconceived notions of it. So that's why it is secretly produced by Mel Brooks, but Mel Brooks hired David Lynch. David Lynch is also credited as one of the screenwriters, although he is not the main screenwriter. It's mainly rewriting that he did on the script that was already done. This movie stars Anthony Hopkins as Dr. Frederick Treves, John Hurt as John Merrick, who is the Elephant Man, and Bancroft, Mel Brooks's wife, as Mrs. Kendall. And I don't call her Mel Brooks's wife to, downgrade her or anything. She is the fabulous Oscar-winning Anne Bancroft. And John Gielgud as Carr. The movie is about John Merrick, who is actually a real person. But this movie is heavily fictionalized and doesn't follow what actually happened in John Merrick's life. He's a real man who was born disfigured, known as the Elephant Man. There is books that this movie is actually based on, but like I said, this movie was rewritten and heavily fictionalized. And why would I suggest The Elephant Man to honor David Lynch instead of one of his more experimental and avant-garde works? It's basically for that. It's a very accessible film and it sort of eases you in to his experimental style rather than hitting you over the head with Eraserhead or Inland Empire or even Twin Peaks, something like that. This is not his only normal narrative story. He also did the movie The Straight Story. That is pretty much just a narrative story without the experimental edges of David Lynch. So it's more of, I'm talking to people who have never really gotten into the films of David Lynch or have just, maybe they saw one of his more out there films and they're like, this isn't for me, and never watched another David Lynch film again. This is for you to say, this is also what he could do. And it's not the 1984 Dune, because I don't know if we should be honoring him with a movie that he so much did not like himself, that was actually taken away from him. It's not the vision that he wanted because of studio interference. So Anthony Hopkins' character is the doctor who saved John Merrick, who, heavily disfigured man. He was kind of at that point scraping together a living, being promoted as a sideshow circus freak. And this story shows that behind this monstrous facade of a face and a body reveals the person behind it, the kindness and the humanity, the intelligence and the sophistication that this man had when he did not focus on his looks. The Elephant Man is also one of David Lynch's most successful films. It was made on a budget of $5 million and made over $26 million at the box office when it was released. It had quite a return. It was quite critically acclaimed. It is a testament to what David Lynch can do with a linear story and some groundbreaking visuals. John Hurt, of course, plays John Merrick with heavy prosthetics that at first, David Lynch himself, he was a very hands-on guy and hands-on director who was in parts of all of the filmmaking. He liked to help build the sets, build the furniture on the sets, the set dressing. He also wanted to be the one who applied the makeup for the Elephant Man, and he took a shot and it did not come out well. That's when he relented and left it up to the makeup artist. And for the time, the makeup in this film is brilliant. And more towards David Lynch's experimental side, he decided to shoot this whole film in black and white to harken back to the time frame that this took place in. It's an artistic decision that happens every once in a while. That year, you also had Raging Bull, that was shot in black and white with some color scenes in it as an artistic expression. That's a little bit of the experimental side of David Lynch that you're introduced to in this movie, but goes nowhere as far as most of his other movies. The Elephant Man was also shot on location in and around London, England, with some very prominent landmarks of London, which was extraordinary for David Lynch because, as many people know, David Lynch was such a creature of habit. One of his habits was eating at Bob's Big Boy in Burbank every day. At this point, he had done it for years. Mel Brooks, to convince him that he could do this on location in London, he had to find an actual restaurant that David Lynch would be comfortable with being able to eat at every day that would give him a good hamburger. And since he was able to do that, David Lynch was able to make this film and scene at that restaurant every day until he could get back to Los Angeles and go back to his beloved Bob's Big Boy. If you watch this film, if you've never seen it before, I think you'll be struck by how touching this story is. The humanity that comes out in this production, the acting in this movie by everybody involved is extraordinary. The directing of David Lynch is also top-notch. This is one of his Academy Award nominated directing moments, which was, he wasn't nominated all the time because of his experimental style of filming. And he goes right back to that style of filmmaking right after he makes the movie. It's only a few movies in his career that he did such straight-laced narrative stories. But I promise you, if you've never seen this movie and want to dip your toe into David Lynch, The Elephant Man is a great way to dip the toe if you're not ready for one of his more out there works. And it is so touching. It was on several critics' top 10 list. It was named by several people as the favorite movie of 1980, and 1980 has some heavy hitter films in it. And yes, this is the year where Raging Bull came out as well, also considered one of the best movies ever made. This is the year also when Ordinary People shocked many by winning Best Picture, and I'm not going to be harsh on Ordinary People. Do I think it's as good as The Elephant Man or Raging Bull? No. And I don't mean as good, I mean as memorable. No. But is Ordinary People a great movie? Yeah, it is. So I'm not gonna sit here and take a crap on Ordinary People. I do like that movie. But when you go back into films that change the narrative still like 20, 30 years, 40 years later, Raging Bull and The Elephant Man are two of those movies and not necessarily Ordinary People. So when it comes to the Academy Awards, The Elephant Man was nominated for 8 Academy Awards. It goes on to win none of them. And talking about the makeup Oscar was not one of them it was nominated for because that award did not exist yet. The makeup category did not exist until I believe the following year Oscars, and that was partly because of the outcry that this wasn't even awarded a special Oscar for makeup, which is how they awarded it back then. If they thought something rose to the occasion of being spectacular in its field and there wasn't a category that covered it, then the Academy had a stipulation that it can do a special Oscar, which at this point is how not only makeup was awarded, but how special effects was awarded. And this year they do award a special effects award to The Empire Strikes Back, and rightfully so. The previous Star Wars film also benefited from a special Oscar for special effects, but no such love for The Elephant Man for this. And part of that was the inception of the makeup category coming to fruition because of people's outcry that this was not honored in the makeup category. So when it comes to the Oscars, yes, it was nominated for 8 Academy Awards and did not win any. But the categories it was nominated in was Best Picture. It was also nominated for Best Lead Actor for John Hurt, and that is the year where Robert De Niro won for Best Actor. All of the actors in The Elephant Man, John Hurt is the only one nominated in any acting role for The Elephant Man. It's also nominated for art direction. There's a big year for the technical awards, technical-ish awards like art direction, cinematography, stuff like that, for the movie Tess, which goes on to win a lot of these awards, including art direction. It was nominated for costume design. Like I said, David Lynch was nominated for directing The Elephant Man. This is the year where Robert Redford wins director for Ordinary People. Martin Scorsese was also nominated for Raging Bull, which a lot of people think he should have won. It's the bane of Martin Scorsese's existence that when actors make their first directorial debut and they are nominated for Oscars, and he is also nominated for Oscars for directing, the actor will win. This repeats itself. In 1991, he loses the directing Oscar to Kevin Costner for Dances with Wolves, instead of him winning for Goodfellas. The Elephant Man was also nominated for film editing, which that did go to Raging Bull, so at least Raging Bull won something. Elephant Man was also nominated for original score. The winner of that was the movie Fame. And Elephant Man was also nominated for writing an adapted screenplay, which it also did not win. That went also to Ordinary People. So little fun facts about surrounding the making of this movie and David Lynch is, so David Lynch had, of course, made Eraserhead a few years earlier, and that was his first feature film. And besides that, he had made a lot of short films and very independent, very avant-garde. And at the time, to supplement his income between like Eraserhead and The Elephant Man, David Lynch was working as a roofer when Mel Brooks offered him the chance to direct this film. It's crazy to think, because a lot of us think once you have your first breakout hit film, you never have to work an ordinary job again. And a lot of times this is just not the case. Paramount Pictures was the studio that released the film, but like I said, it was produced by Mel Brooks. And although this is more of David Lynch's more linear storytelling, there are some surrealist moments in this film which didn't really please Paramount Pictures, and Mel Brooks stood up for it every time, saying at one point after they screened the movie and they had objections to the beginning and the end of the film because of its surrealist leanings, he said, "We are involved in a business venture. We screen the film for you to bring you up to date as of the status of the venture. Do not misconstrue this as our soliciting the input of raging primitives." I would have liked to been there when he told that to them. I could just imagine Mel Brooks doing it, but as a nod to the great Mel Brooks, he always stood up for the art. And besides the little input about Mel Brooks having to find David Lynch a place to eat while he was in London, David Lynch was also not prepared for the cool London weather, so Mel Brooks had to actually buy David Lynch a coat to work on this movie. He came unprepared. He had been living in California for years. So like I said, in honor of David Lynch's passing and us not forgetting what a great filmmaker he is. I urge you to watch one of his movies. And if you are really not into his more avant-garde movies, you're not ready for an Eraserhead, I understand. You're not ready for Blue Velvet. I understand. But for you to understand the greatness and brilliance of David Lynch, I encourage you to watch the movie The Elephant Man. It's a great way to ease yourself into the storytelling of David Lynch before you go off the deep end and maybe watch something that you're not ready for. But by watching The Elephant Man, it might get you ready for some of his other more unusual fare. Again, my name is Stacia, and I'm just a girl on the internet that likes watching movies. I invite you to subscribe to my channel if you also love watching movies. I've made it to 700 subscribers. I'm looking at this year, my goal for the first half of the year, by the end of June, making it to 1,000 subscribers. And I would love for you to join me. I love when you comment because I love responding to comments and reading them all and getting the discussion of film going. To keep this craft alive and know that it is an art form and not just entertainment or something to watch in the background. Some of these movies you really watch and they're really inspiring and really artfully made, and really is the reason why we want to honor filmmakers like David Lynch. He is a class of filmmakers that in more recent years, we're going to lose more and more of them. And I am not sure if we're ready for that. But thank you for joining me. I love you all. See you next time. Bye.